Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and we've got another episode of the MK Ultra series, and this is it. This is kind of the nitty-gritty. Can you make a mind-controlled assassin? Are the Jason Bourne movies based in any kind of reality? Because really that's what you had in those films. You had essentially very obedient assassin types. I know they seem to have free will, but did they really? And I think that line gets crossed when you're just forced to kill somebody without knowing anything about them. You know, I haven't seen, I don't think, the latest one, Jason Bourne, but I thought the one with Jeremy Renner was actually the best in the series. We also did some Hollywood stuff earlier in the week, but I really want to focus in on not only the film The Manchurian Candidate, which we're going to talk about the Frank Sinatra picture. We're going to talk about the Denzel Washington remake, which was excellent. But the terminology, where it comes from, and whether or not this is a possibility or whether or not they even succeeded. So we're going to go back to that documentary by ABC News and play through some of these clips and kind of get the origin story of that terminology.
It was the Cold War, and especially the trial of Joseph Cardinal Mindszenty, who was forced to testify in a Hungarian court that he was a spy. And then later, the Korean War, with the coerced and mainly fraudulent confessions of American servicemen.
My germination took place on the...
That would spark intense interest in intelligence circles about brainwashing. The CIA secretly commissioned a study of communist brainwashing methods at the Cornell University Medical Center. A leader of that study was Dr. Lawrence Hinkle.
Now, I want to point out Cornell, very close to me. You know, I talk about Nexium being very close to me, if you've seen those videos. Cornell, about the same kind of drive, about 90 minutes. And, you know, to have some of these things happen so close to home is pretty chilling. And I'll say this about this doctor. This doctor at least does not seem as cold as the others, and he's rather combative. But, you know, does that just mean that he's more apt to cover things up or lie or distort things? Check it out. I mean, here we go.
He explains first the Russian method of controlling and breaking a person.
Absolutely isolated from everyone else, with one man whose job it is to get you to write the extent to which you are a criminal. In this setting, you can get people to do most anything, do you see? Because you don't have to lay a hand on them. And by the time you get through and you go up before the judge, the fellow says, "Were you a spy?" He says, "Yes, I was a spy."
So let's stop it there. Basically, he's talking about show trials. He's talking about when American citizens or servicemen would be caught, and a lot of times they would claim that they were spies. Sometimes they would be, sometimes they weren't be. But you know, they were talking about that mind control aspect, and that does come into play in a lot of the earlier paperwork in the MK Ultra documents.
The Chinese never really had this kind of a state police system. They would get him in, and all this fellow does is ask you to write, rewrite, and talk to him about your whole life.
Graduated from pilot training in 1949.
While the purpose of the study was to find out about communist brainwashing techniques, CIA documents show that the agency was interested in developing mind control methods of its own to precondition and control Chinese living in this country to be sent back to their homeland as CIA agents.
So there you go. Right out of the gate. So before we get to the actual Manchurian Candidate type assassins, they thought, hey, maybe we can use this MK Ultra stuff, some of the other techniques that we've exposed, you know, outside of just LSD, electroshock, brain electrodes, all these things, that they could use these techniques and then get some of these Chinese citizens living in the United States to unwittingly be spies in China. And remember, this is all taking place in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. This documentary, I believe, is from 1979.
What do you think they were looking for?
Well, I think they weren't looking for agents or anything like that.
Yet the agency's perception of the work you were doing, in CIA documents we have examined,
Yeah.
it says that the project that was being done here they intended to use everything learned about the new agents to induce them to, quote, to perform acts of a complex, purposeful nature.
Yeah, but that was
the
never
effects
done.
of which may be out of keeping with the individual's
That
previous
sort
behavior.
of thing was never done.
So let's just stop it there. See how combative he is? He's looking away. He's shaking his head. He says that thing was never, ever done. We never actually made this actionable. There were no agents that came from this program. You have to ask yourself whether or not he's being honest. And you got to, again, give credit to this reporter for continuing to press him on the matter with the actual documentation.
Those people were not, that was when they first came here, the first people they sent up to see us, you see, were operational type people from the CIA with some rather wild ideas.
Okay, this is their perception of it, if I could
No,
just
it
continue.
wasn't their perception of it either. No, it wasn't
Dangerous to his being, contrary
Yeah,
to
I
any previous
understand that,
consciously
but you
expressed
see,
intentions and
now
interests,
here,
contrary to the good of the
no.
individual and subversive to the goals for which he is
Yeah, I
consciously
understand
working.
all this talk.
Now, he says he understands all this talk and the verbiage, and he tries to frame it that, you know, some of the operational CIA members that came to him to use Cornell University for these quote-unquote MK Ultra programs, remember all these sub-programs, they had wild ideas and delusions of grandeur almost. He doesn't use that terminology, but he basically says things that could not possibly take place. And yet it's contradicted in the paperwork. And again, he's not even really letting him finish what's documented in the paperwork before saying no, 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 no.
But the situation was, you see, those things were never done because of wise people on both sides. We're not able to do this nor interested in it.
When he says wise people on both sides, he means on the university end and then on the intelligence end, and saying that he wasn't interested in it. You know, again, I'll say this, at least he's not as outwardly sadistic as some of the other doctors that we've seen in this series.
They were, though.
Some of the low-level people were, but the high-level people were not, to tell you the truth.
But documents clearly show that the CIA was attempting to develop agents over whom they had as much control as possible. Agents who would perform tasks contrary to their own good.
Now, I skipped over a lot of this because what you're looking at here is the Manchurian Candidate. If you have never seen the original 1962 Manchurian Candidate, it is a must-watch. It's absolutely incredible. And if you look at the time frame of not only when these programs began, but when assassinations on a high scale began to happen in this country, it's very interesting the way that not only this film was perceived, but then Sinatra and United Artists basically had a hand in not allowing it to be viewed in the public arena for 24 years. Now, there's a lot of theories out there that the government put pressure on them. But basically, you got to remember, in the 60s, there's no VHS. Movies ran for years in theaters, especially the popular ones. And this was an extremely popular picture. Really smart picture. Stands up to this day. And essentially, you know, Sinatra had campaigned for Kennedy, had a relationship with him, and although that relationship had some fallings out, he apparently was devastated by the death. Now, United Artists takes it off the scene, and then Sinatra acquires the rights. And I think that it actually does air once in like 65 and 74 in cinemas at certain screen leads. There it is right there, 65, yes, and in 1974. So in 1987, they roll it out. I think Sinatra still owns it at a 25th anniversary screening. And it does extremely well, and that's when United Artists picks it back up, and they redistribute the picture. And eventually, Sinatra's daughter, apparently, is also very heavily involved in the remake, which is excellent, and actually gets more into biometric technology, microchips, some of the brain electrodes, and takes place, you know, in the present at the time, which is like 2004, and then the Gulf War, the original Gulf War. And it is, you know, Denzel Washington does a bang-up job. Roger Ebert actually did the review on this. 3 stars does not do it justice. This is a 4.5 star film by far. So I can't recommend this enough. Now, the big controversy that was actually going on at the time, outside of just Kennedy's killer, and there's some documents that suggest that the FBI, the CIA, they were interested in the possibility of a mind-controlled assassin having to do with Kennedy possibly. But later on with Robert Kennedy and Sirhan, and how RFK Jr. has now asked for a new investigation into that. But we're going to get into that when we ask the question whether or not this is really possible. So let's continue with this old documentary.
Is a Manchurian candidate, controlled by others to do things against his will, possible?
It was a remarkable film because, as far as I'm concerned, it made something totally impossible seem absolutely credible.
So let's stop it right there. Now, remember, you're looking at the time, the ex-chief psychologist for the Central Intelligence Agency. And he said some very, I would say, contradictory things to the evidence in this piece. He's constantly defending the CIA. Now, what you're going to hear from now is an analyst who worked with the CIA and used hypnosis. And why is hypnosis important? Well, remember when we talked about Thornwell and some of these victims, hypnosis was essential with these drugs. Playing tapes, giving suggestions in breaking down the mind. We know they were successful, at the very least, of causing amnesia of 6 to 10 years for some of their victims. And I'm actually going to do yet another series on some more of their victims and who they were, because it's incredible. But let's get to this gentleman here.
I would say the answer is yes, but there are many qualifications to that.
Dr. Milton Klein, a psychologist, a clinical and experimental hypnotist, and unpaid consultant to the CIA.
So, unpaid consultant, odd, right? And he says yes, but certain conditions. And that's why, just quickly, I want to show you this, and I encourage everybody to check that out. In fact, I'm not sure if I'm going to do another live stream later, another video, but if I don't, go check this out. Darren Brown, the assassin with Stephen Fry. And what happens here is, he uses suggestion and hypnosis to create a modern-day assassin, to assassin Stephen Fry at an event, using a lot of the quote-unquote theories that surround Sirhan, the woman in the polka-dotted dress, and MK Ultra style Manchurian candidate. And I don't want to ruin it for you, but I will say this. It's compelling television. I don't know whether any of it was staged, but Darren Brown did recently do a podcast with Joe Rogan where he not only talked about this, and I was very interested that he talked about this, but he said it wasn't staged. He said they were able to do this, and it's the real deal. So again, I don't believe everything I read or see on television, but it's definitely worth looking at. So let's talk to this guy. This guy is pretty honest and frank in what their abilities are.
The qualifications would be the subject selected to produce the kind of behavior that you wish, the amount of time, the procedures that are utilized, and the motivations of the people who are designing, executing, and administering the procedures. You're asking whether an individual can be, under hypnosis, influenced, coerced, persuaded, shaped to perform an antisocial act, or a destructive act, or an act of violence. My answer would be yes.
How valuable a tool can hypnosis be in the intelligence field?
None whatsoever. It has absolutely no use because nobody's ever been able to do that I know of, do it in an operationally feasible way. I'm not in any way saying that hypnosis doesn't take place. I'm not saying there's nothing to it.
So let's stop it. See how he kind of double speaks there? He's like, no, it's not operational. We can't do it. And then he's like, but it may take place. It just doesn't work, apparently. Because, again, we know that Thornwell, who, again, is in the Victim series, in the documents, they used hypnosis. And if you read the documents, hypnosis is used over and over and over again, especially with the LSD drug, the amphetamines, and a lot of the other things that are not listed. Again, let's continue.
I would say that most government agencies concerned with intelligence operations have been looking to hypnosis as a tool for a variety of purposes, one of which is to carry out and to execute certain intelligence operations on a basis where they would not have to rely completely on some of their own emotional reactions. Actually,
Would that entail murder?
So I want to stop it there. Emotional reactions. Empathy, apathy, perhaps, love or compassion for another human being on a mission. We don't want those. We don't want those. Would you commit murder now? Look at this. This is where he gets uncomfortable. Murder. And he looks down. You know, he's been pretty frank and honest so far in this interview. But right here, you can see it in his face. He looks down. Murder?
It could, if you consider that an act of killing someone under circumstances of war is murder. I think one has to define what that means.
Under circumstances of peace.
Under circumstances of peace, it would be murder.
Another former CIA agent says that Fidel Castro at one time was considered as a possible target for a Manchurian candidate.
Castro was naturally our discussion point. Could you get somebody gung-ho enough that they would go in and get him? But if you have 100% control of a guy, you have 100% dependency.
I just want to point out the person you're hearing is actually reading a CIA agent that worked in the MK Ultra program testimony. Earlier in some of these, we talked about how he wouldn't go on film, he wouldn't be recorded. But he talks about how Castro was a target of this program. So again, guys, I think I'm going to wrap this up, but I want people to check out the original Manchurian Candidate, the remake. They're both absolutely fantastic films, and really look into what's available in the public vernacular in these documents, because you're going to see that obviously some of these programs were successful or they wouldn't have gone on for decades plus spans. And when you watch the Darren Brown, The Assassin, cannot recommend it enough. There it is, with Stephen Fry. Please watch this. You can see how from a large pool of people, somebody out of that large pool, through manipulation and processes and tests to see how suggestible that person is, could become this Manchurian Candidate. Guys, if you like these videos, I'm trying to do as many as possible. I'm pumping them out. You know, I'm doing 4 a day over at We Are Change and Pulse Change, and then when I can do them on the personal channel, I'm doing them. We hit that 15K. Thank you so much. You're awesome. I really appreciate it. The next goal is to get to 30K. So if you're not a subscriber and you just watch this MK Ultra thing for the first time and you want to see more, please subscribe, hit the notification buttons, go to my videos, go check out the past stuff where we go over more and more of that documentary and more documentation. I got upcoming videos on Dick Cheney coming, the Dark Overlord, Nexium, and much more. Please, guys, grow with me. Join the Burmis Brigade. Share this stuff on social media, and I promise you we're going to do great things. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video.